trying to explain that woke derives from Marxist thinking, which I've traced back through copious amounts of their own literature and the older literature like Marx. The thing is this identity politics, victim narrative, conspiracy theory about a system of power that excludes people like us from the full fruits of society, which is what woke is. You wake up to believing that there's a critical interpretation of reality that's being hidden from you. That's what it literally means. Critical consciousness is the technical word. Well, that can apply to anybody, anywhere, who decides that they adopt a victim-oriented, it's actually called a slave morality about the way society works, that there's an organized system, not necessarily individuals or a conspiracy, but an organized system that keeps people like them away from opportunity and power. The woke can adopt this on the left using things like systemic racism or heteronormativity or classism, as in classical Marxism. They can adopt it on the right instead by taking up an idea that there's a post-war consensus to drive true conservatives out, or that classical liberalism is intrinsically and characteristically flawed to always turn into Marxism over time, both of which are very prominent narratives on this so-called woke right.
That's exactly what it is, and I've been pushing back on that too. You know, we are living through a political moment now where Trump has been tremendously successful. Republican Party under his leadership has been tremendously successful. The right holds political power right now. They're obsessed with cultural power, so they're always still complaining that, you know, Hollywood is still filled with a bunch of liberals. Okay, fine. Actual political power right now is pretty concentrated on the right to greatest extent in my lifetime there's probably ever been. So now's a moment to actually do something. And then the things I would want to do as a classical liberal are, yes, what government departments can we cut? How can we restore more power to state and local actors? How can we put more decision-making hands in families, parents on education issues? All that kind of good, classically liberal, libertarian, conservative stuff. And then what I hear, and a lot of people on the right want to do that. You know, we're not totally at odds. But then some of the people go, but right now we control these political institutions, so we can set up commissions and committees and grow bureaucracies and make things and do it our way and force this kind of vision that we have. And I'm like, but I thought the whole point was to end some of these systems and to liberate people. And they're like, it's a very Lord of the Rings kind of, you know, Council of Rivendell. Wait, no, we have the ring, we can use it. And actually, a lot of these people love the Lord of the Rings and know exactly where that kind of thinking leads. But is it really an admiration for Marxist leftism or wokeness? I do see that admiration to some extent. They go, oh, yeah, they love rules for radicals and all that. They're like, oh, Gramsci was onto things. Are you seeing an intellectual influence?
There is an intellectual influence, and of course, like you said, Lord of the Rings is the right metaphor. Boromir and just about everybody else at some point or another coveted the ring and the power that it conferred so that they might be able to fight the Dark Lord Sauron with its power, using its own tactics, so to speak, or its own power or energy back against it. But of course, the theme of the Lord of the Rings is that the ring is wrought in evil and it cannot be used to do good, and so you'll just set yourself up, if you even win, as a new Dark Lord on a new Dark Tower. So the idea is that it's like the perfect metaphor for what we're dealing with, but there is this intellectual undercurrent to it where, yeah, they're saying things, and this includes intellectuals like Patrick Deneen, who's written about this a lot. This includes people on the internet in the kind of pop circuit like Mike Cernovich and Carl Benjamin, who are talking about how both the Marxists and, well, Marx himself was an excellent writer and had great critiques of liberalism. That comes from Cernovich, it comes from Carl Benjamin, and so on. This has been a big theme. They're reclaiming the critical theorists, but and like you said, Gramsci has been completely embraced by a segment of the right. Gramsci's idea of infiltrating the long march into the institutions. The left did it to us, so we get to do it back to them, and we're going to install our view of the world, because they've accepted the leftist woke framing, nothing is value neutral, so we have to therefore assert our values over everybody else through power. And so they're embracing these critical theorists, the neo-Marxists, that is, and Marx himself, but not his specific conclusions. That's the argument. He made good critiques, and he had a really good understanding of what was going on, which is false, by the way, in both cases. But his solutions are wrong, so we need to use these different, national conservative solutions instead, or some such.
Yeah, I think people without as deep a familiarity with Marx as you have are often, they think Marx is just socialism or Marx is just, well, wants a socialist distribution of labor. Marx had specific theories that did not come to pass, about like predictive theories, right? That he thought capitalism was the last stage before an inevitable worker-led communist revolution that was going to be accelerated and was going to take place within his lifetime, right? It's not different from the kind of like a religious cult in 17th century America predicting the end of the world is coming on this day, and then it doesn't come to pass. And then he has these disciples who try to, rehabilitate his theory and say, well, it didn't come to pass for XYZ reasons, but it still has some validity to it. I'm like, no, it didn't happen. You got to admit you were wrong at some point. So why would people on the right be worshiping this thing? Well, he got a lot of things right. The critiques were right. The critiques were all about a prediction, a like world-ending prediction that did not happen.
So they think he's right because power. Basically, they saw that Marxism was able to exert tremendous power over the world. It's, in my opinion, through the woke on the left, threatened even America and the Western free nations very seriously, in that we're still in the grips of this tremendous problem. Woke on the left is not dead. It's entrenching and kind of waiting and biding its time. But they see that it worked to get the left power, and it's power that they covet, whether that's because they are ambitious themselves, whether because many of them are openly Machiavellian, for example, so they want to espouse that, deceitful lust for power, because power is all that matters, or realpolitik is all that matters in their opinion. And some of them, I think it's out of fear and desperation. We're so close to the brink. Desperate times call for desperate measures is the kind of old slang from the movie. But what I hear, actually, some segments of the woke right say, and we haven't talked about the ones who believe that it's Jewish power, of course, which is rampant and rife on social media, but these people are out there, and the slang now that I see on the internet is Weimar problems require Weimar solutions, which is a direct invocation of needing to re-engage the Nazi experiment, as I have come to call it, as I study the fascists and the National Socialists, which of course is a tremendous mistake. And so I think it's power. It's like, for example, today I'm seeing on social media a campaign from some of these characters. For example, Andrew Isker, who is a recent guest on Tucker Carlson, is out saying something to the effect of, I wish we could abolish the Congress and the judiciary and make Trump what amounts to a Carl Schmittian, although he didn't use the term, unbound executive. Carl Schmitt was the crown jurist of the Third Reich and wrote the legal basis for the total state for the Nazi regime in 1933. And so now let's get rid of the Congress because it's not doing what we want. Let's get rid of the judiciary because it's not doing what we want. Let's just have an unbound, all-powerful executive, which is the exact opposite of the American program. You see them talk about wanting to have new constitutional thinking, to get rid of our current constitution and replace it. And I see this as very little different from the woke stuff we've seen on the left for the last 10 years.
Let's talk about the anti-Semitic element of it. I admit that I am always a little bit skeptical when mainstream figures or media figures say that, oh, there's this secret undercurrent of racism or or bigotry or whatever it is on the right. They're always saying that. They're relying on organizations that compile hate crime statistics in misleading ways, that have financial incentives always to pretend that racism is getting worse or Nazi affiliation is getting worse or whatever it is. They're always, saying that. So many examples of misrepresentation. So I am skeptical when that is presented to me. However, when someone like Rod Dreher, writing in the Free Press this week, this is someone very much on the right, I would say even more of the nationalist kind of right, has some affinity for what Hungary's doing. I very much respect him as a writer and thinker. I have a lot of disagreements with him. He says that he is worried that there is a rising trend of anti-Semitism, and then he got into a little bit of a disagreement about whether we're supposed to call that the woke right or call it something else. I'm not convinced woke right is necessarily the right term or captures enough of what I'm seeing, but what I am seeing exists. I am worried now, and of course it's absolutely present on the left as well. The anti-Semitism there has never even gone away, frankly. But I am seeing some anti-Semitism in this young online segment of the right that maybe you can write it off as trolling or whatever it is, the deliberate irony kind of frog meme people to some extent. But I think there is something a little bit real there. I don't quite know where it's coming from. How do we push back against it?
I am not entirely sure where it's coming from either. There are a lot of factors. There's pretty strong evidence that it's got massive bot support, including from foreign actors. So it's being amplified artificially in social media. You cannot go on X or to a degree YouTube, and to a lesser degree